Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is my 1957 Dodge Coronet Lancer two-door hardtop, currently cold and very wet. In previous episodes, I bought this project car from Tom Hergert with Rocket Restorations. Then Allan and I set about transforming it from a dusty, abandoned project to a less dusty, less stinky project in progress. If I'm honest, Allan did all of the really hard work, like deleting Lord knows how many pounds of rat poop from in here. The smell was atrocious. It's still quite bad. Remind me to get an ozone generator. Originally, we're pretty sure this thing had a Dodge poly under the hood. That's not to be confused with a later A-Series poly engine like the Poly 318 we all know and love. It was an earlier one based on a Dodge Hemi. I'm using this, a 361 big block, which is currently neither cold nor wet. Big blocks weren't available in 1957 Dodges. They were new for 1958. Basically, my plan here is to replicate the 1958 Dodge Super D500, which would have been a 361B engine, painted silver, with dual quads, and these same exact dual gold air cleaners, which are fantastic. When it's done, it'll pretty much look exactly like this. If I wanted to be even fancier, I could have cloned the 1959 Super D500, which happened to have red valve covers and these super cool decals. But I'm not going to do that. The Coronet and Perky here are the two project cars I get asked about in the comments on this channel all the time. And I get it. They're super cool cars. Given that I've made a bunch of progress on Perky recently, I suppose it's time to give the Coronet a similar amount of treatment. The first part of this operation is going to look a good bit like an Engine Wednesday video because I need to get this bottom end cleaned and then fully assemble this thing and then get all of it in a glorious shade of silver before moving on. Allan took these and the oil pan we're going to use home and cleaned them up. And when he brought them back, well, I just couldn't help myself. Right now, though, we don't need shiny valve covers. We need a whole engine. So I'm going to take all this dress stuff off of here and get working on that. But wait, take a look at this. The Dead Dodge Garage merch store just got a tune-up right in time for the holidays. We've got brand new Scrap Pack hoodies. We've got Dead Dodge Garage logo hoodies back in stock finally. And a brand new shirt design. That's right. It's everybody's favorite, hopefully future wheel stander, hand-drawn by Finley the McNugget. It comes in this delightful ash color, and of course, it's got the Dead Dodge Garage logo on the back. Our collection of Scrap Pack merch is growing, and there will be even more coming soon. And of course, we've still got a full line of Dead Dodge Garage logo merch. T-shirts, hats, hoodies, all the things. So make sure you head over to shop.deaddodgegarage.com and check it out. If you're trying to order Christmas presents, you might want to get on that. And keep your eye out for future merch releases because we've got more great designs coming, like this little gem. All right, let's get back to the Coronet. Look at these shiny cylinder heads. These, I believe, are only the second set of heads I've ever had gone through by a machine shop for myself. I did that because they're the correct 4-bolt heads for this early engine style. As you can see, they also use the pedestal style rockers. I've got the ones that came with these heads in a box somewhere, and I also have another set. The ones that came off of the perfectly good heads that I removed only because they have corner bolts. I randomly found these heads sitting in the lobby at Johnson Machine. They sold them to me for, let's say, the right price, and then fixed everything wrong with them. They got upgraded valve springs with dampers, as you can see there. I think these got new exhaust seats. They got whatever they needed, in addition to a good cleaning job and new plugs, of course. Here you can see the closed chambers on these early heads, also the teeny tiny exhaust valves. You can also see something else not so great I've just noticed on these freshly machined deck surfaces. And that is, of course, rusty nastiness around where the coolant ports in the block were sitting against this new head. What do you notice about the alignment or lack thereof between that water hole and the water hole in the block? Apparently these water ports in the deck changed over the years. This is a 1974 40 and instead of a circle, it's an oval. Doesn't look any taller or shorter, really. These are some 70s 452s or whatever I've got sitting around, and they have a triangular port in this area. These 915 heads have nothing at all. The same is true of the heads I took off this 361. You can see there the gasket actually fully blocked this port anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. The new Felpro gasket covers it too, so we're good. Notice the funky coolant port mismatch up here. They're always like that. It looks like someone's actually done some mild porting on these early, totally unimpressive heads. You know, because race car. Oh yeah, I forgot. These heads actually got inserts on the exhaust and intake sides. No idea why. Aside from the nastiness here, these heads are pretty and clean and ready to rock and roll play. The block, not so much. So the next quite a bit of my life is going to look kind of like this. Scraping, scrubbing, vacuuming, spraying. Trying to get the outside of this thing kind of sort of clean and decent and ready for a coat of paint. Please hold. I should hope it's obvious that perfection is not the goal here. I mean, this is Dead Dodge Garage you're watching. It never is. I just want this thing to turn out kind of presentable. You know, if it looked half as good as that Slant 6 I sprayed the other day when I'm done, well, I'd be tickled pink. Okay, not a Mint 1 owner by any stretch, but that's looking pretty good. Most of the grime is off. Paint will kind of stick to, let's say, most of this. I was asked why I wasn't going to automatically replace the core plugs on this engine. Well, because I don't need to. After something like 45 minutes of scraping, scrubbing, vacuuming, etc., the block looks like this. And the floor looks like this. But I think that'll do. Have I mentioned this block was cast the day after Christmas, 1962? I think that's kind of neat. It's the next day, and we're removing chunks, stuff, from places. It's not just good, it's good enough. Let's put some parts on this thing. Part number 1 is going to be this camshaft. Recall, if you will, this is a used comp I took out of the 383 that came with the car. A couple of the lifters had some yucky spots on them. I still have to clean those. The cam itself looks really good. I don't see any damage to any faces. The comp number is right here. It's a 260HE. It's nothing crazy. I think the lift is like 440. Should be a nice mild street cam. Nice, nice. For some reason, I'm going to use a basic single row factory type chain for this engine. That reason is I have a literally brand new one I took out of that 383, and I see no reason not to. I've installed it dot to dot. Should I verify those marks are right? I probably should. Okay. Remind me to get a set of tip extensions for this stupid thing. Yeah, I need more hands and a flashlight. 50 thousandths tappet lift on the ramp up side is here at 6 degrees. Here's maximum lift measured at the lifter. It appears to be 288 thousandths, which multiplied by the rocker ratio is something like 432 lift on the intake side. Of course, the numbers on the degree wheel are stupid. 90, 100, 110, 111-ish is my estimated center line based on max lift. But we'll roll over to 50 thou lift on the other side of the ramp and do some math to verify. I know it looks like that number is 43, but it's 217, and doing the math between the two, the intake center line is 111.5. I did go look at the cam card. This cam's supposed to have 440 lift intake and exhaust, and the advertised duration is 260, same as that part number on the back. The duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift is supposed to be 212 degrees. Now here's a kind of cool thing. Because I'm measuring at 50 thousandths for these reference marks to find the center line, all I have to do is subtract that number from that number, and that will tell us how much of this circle that lifter is above 50 thousandths. It just happens to be 211, or 12, or whatever. Anyway, as far as that installed angle or intake lobe center line, I can't find a cam card for this thing to verify that's what comp wanted. This cam is still sold. They don't call it the 260H or HE anymore. They call it the 212/212, which is the 50 thou duration. But there's no center line attached to any of the specifications I can find on comp's site or anywhere else. Now, this intake center line happens to be basically the same as where I installed the cam in the 6-barrel engine I put together recently, and I think I'm just sticking with it. If for no other reason than this timing set isn't adjustable, so I pretty much have to, without way too much work. Hey Alexa, add acid brushes to my shopping list. Yeah, it's a little easier to do the yucky way on a small block. The holes are bigger. Anyway, timing cover, still need to put the new front seal in that. Rear main seal cap, need to roll in the upper half of the seal, get that thing all happy, and then the pan can go on. Going to knock this new front seal into this suspiciously already silver timing cover now. It has to be done from the back side with a socket that fits inside the seal. I've got an appropriate one around here somewhere. Grab your seal, cover it in some grease, make a terrible mess, drop that in there, grab your socket, and carefully, ever so carefully, on something that won't ruin your fresh paint, smash it with a hammer. Nice. Dang, I'm good. Didn't even ruin it. Don't forget your slinger, like I almost did for like the 100th time. Some people just throw those things away, you know. Of course, like a month ago now, I cleaned every bit of hardware for this thing in the ultrasonic, so all that is nice and shiny and ready to go. You know what I haven't cleaned for this thing yet? Harmonic balancer. Make the noise. Now that's fine on a big block because unlike on an LA, this cover is located by the pins, so I can just move on and throw that on there when it's ready. The rear seal cap for this engine came out absolutely beautiful from its cleaning. The only problem with it is that those rear oil pan bolt holes are punched through. There's a possibility for leaking there. Dude, I don't know what I did, but my little air blowy guy is just gone. I've been looking for it for I don't know how long. Dude. Sure. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I need someone to come over here and like punch me. Let's make sure it's a surprise. Well, at least it wasn't my eye. Anyway, a really long time later, I'm just about ready to put the seal cap in. You can see I've got half of the seal installed in that. I've got the side rails here. Those are the Felpro style, ready to rock. All I have to do is roll the all-important top half into the block. The lip of the seal, which I've covered in grease in this case for easier installation and protection before this thing runs and gets oil to it, always goes towards the fluid it's sealing. So we're gonna roll this thing in around the crank, which I also greased a little bit. I did not grease the backside of the seal. That would probably not be a good idea. Got it started in there. Carefully rolling it in. Pushing on the end of it. Almost home. Almost. Don't want to get grease on this piece. Silicone has to seal that. Yeah. Perfection. Oh, the thingy finished. It's looking pretty good, but I flipped it over for one more run. Okay. Hopefully those little side seals put themselves where they go. And the cap isn't going crooked. Absolute perfection. And it definitely didn't take me 2 tries. Hurtling toward oil pan installation now. One of the last things I need to do is install this pickup. This is the original I took out of this engine. I cleaned the crap out of this thing, and there's still a little bit of residue back in there, but I've decided I don't actually care. The more typical muscle car era mid-sump pickup looks like this with a kink in it. The one out of this engine is straight. I don't know if this would have worked for the earlier pan or not. There's the oil pan set in place to check the pickup height. It was just touching it. When the gasket goes in here, it should be absolutely perfect, just off the bottom of the pan. Notice this thing was pretty smashed. Allan straightened all of that out as best he could and cleaned the crap out of this thing before I hit it with some paint. I've decided I'm not going to run a windage tray, and I have a few reasons for that. First, the spirit of the build. I mean, it's got a single row timing chain. Yes, it does have a baby cam and, well, it'll have dual quads on top, but it's not like this is some crazy engine. Second, I only have one windage tray here, and it's for another build, and I only have one oil pan gasket. To install a tray, you need 2. So I've got our one gasket set on here. Aside from siliconing the seams at the rear seal and the timing cover, I left the block side dry. I did hit the pan side with the forbidden steak sauce aircraft seal and stuff, and we're ready to drop it in place. I did seal the threads on these 2 back bolts since they're going into oil now. Maybe that'll do something. You know, I used to fully seal these pans with silicone. It worked, but it turns out that's not a great idea, because sometimes, well, you have to remove these oil pans. When they're double silicone sealed, that involves a pry bar and a hammer. You always want to take care of the next guy, because there's a really good chance the next guy is going to be you. Anyway, I'll snug these down by hand with the oil pan and valve cover torquing tool, the speed wrench, and I will come through and retorque them later. And by later, I mean maybe 10 minutes from now. Really want to get this spun over and install some heads. Good idea to not get that stuff everywhere, by the way. Really hard to clean off again after the fact. Hey Siri, add 5 gallons of lacquer thinner to my shopping list. You know what else I haven't cleaned for this thing yet? Water pump housing. Dang it! Probably because it's hiding in here. Poor little fella's shy. Definitely need a new pump for this thing. And a set of heater nipples, because these ones are not looking too hot. I am going to run this early style housing. It has the provisions for the other arm that mounts the alternator on there. Because these early heads don't have holes for the later style, I kind of have to. The only problem is I sold these brackets off this engine like 5 years ago. That wasn't smart, was it? I've decided while it's upside down and I have easy access to most of the block, I might as well just hit it. Oh yeah, buddy. That is beautiful. This color is actually called cast coat aluminum. It's kind of a metallic-y silver. It's the closest to the correct color that the parts store had. It's cold, and this has some metallic to it. It's really easy to get sags. You may have noticed I didn't bother with any masking. I pretty much don't believe in that for engines, for the most part. Little bits of overspray on various internal components never hurt anybody. Just asked the timing chain on this engine from the last guy. I did get some little flecks of paint on the deck surfaces, which I'm working on cleaning off. The only problem with that is, well, these are like textured. The factory machining sucked, but I actually think this deck was resurfaced, judging by the fact that this is so shiny and the factory numbers aren't here anymore. You know, I've read that old timers used to seal head gaskets of the shim type with silver paint. So that basically means this is fine, I think. Now sure, the paint they had back in the day was a little more cancery, but still. On a viewer's suggestion, I've been meaning for quite some time now to pick up some paper coffee filters to use to clean up the fuzz these towels leave behind after I'm done wiping. Hey Bixby! Now things are getting real. In a perfect world, I would have used factory type shim gaskets, but I don't have any. And these come in that kit, so there you go. Here's a little engine assembly tip for you. Make yourself a happy little pool of engine oil here in the valley. Then you can roll your head bolts in there and your push rods and other small things as you're assembling them so they have some lubrication. You don't have to keep this thing in your hand at all times. I have the original plug wire guards that came off. The driver's side does seem to fit with the HP manifold, so I'm going to reinstall those. Oh good, more speed wrenching, like a lot more. You know these things have a bunch of head bolts? Way more than small block LA engines, which is a good thing. Heads are torqued in place. These bolts, of course, go to 70 pound-feet in 3 stages. Now it's time to reinstall these lifters. As I do that, I am going to be looking for any little bits of cruddies. I'll be putting some fresh oil on here as well as in the bores, and then some more of that fancy Chrysler branded caramel on the faces. Lifters are all in. They looked pretty good. There was a little chunk of random stuff stuck in one of them, but I got that out. Otherwise, they dropped right in there. No drama. Pre-lubricating the cups for the push rods now. These are later style lifters. They have the bigger cups for the later style push rods, and I believe there's even a height difference there. So I guess I'm going to take the ones from the 383. Yep, they're ugly factory push rods. They've got some red overspray on them. You know I don't mind that. I do kind of mind the rust on a couple of these ball ends, so I guess I'm going to polish those up real quick. Obviously, these are still very ugly, but I did clean up the couple rusty ends, wiped them down, and I changed my mind on the overspray only because it was mostly removing itself. I guess when you spray paint on greasy surfaces, it doesn't really like to stay there. Who knew? Now, it's certainly possible that we could have a problem here with push rod length, what with the aftermarket reground cam and the valve work having been done. Hopefully not. When the rockers go on, I'm going to be watching the amount that the push rods compress the lifters very closely. If it seems excessive, or if it's non-existent, yeah, we're gonna have to do something with push rods. Here's one half of the set of early style rockers I'll be running on the 361. Now, if you've only ever messed with later Mopars, these might not look familiar to you. The rockers themselves are pretty similar, as are the little spacer ring thingies, but these have these big, gigantic cast aluminum stands, whereas the later style are just clamped down onto the head, which has cast-in iron stands by little steel hold-down thingies. The pedestal-style big block rockers are very similar to the engine families that came before them, like the Poly, except of course the pedestal here is cast into the head instead of a separate piece. Unlike the steel hold-downs, these don't just fall off when you take the bolts out. I think they're actually a press fit. If I wanted to take this rocker assembly apart, I'd probably have to heat those. I've already cleaned this setup extensively and it's looking really good. Before I started, it looked like this. Not so good. This set of rockers came with the heads from the machine shop, and they've been sitting there for a very long time. Because of that, they're full of the stuff that the air in the machine shop is generally full of. Metal dust. I'm gonna get this nice shiny set far away from the set I still need to clean off. I've got some lubrication in here. All of these are nice and oily underneath the shafts. Of course, when I pre-lube this engine later, the shafts will be fully filled and these will get extra oil anyway. Original big block heads don't have holes for the push rods, so if you don't use a wire or something like that to hold them in place, they just fall down right in the way of this. You can see I've got them hanging down. I'm gonna run all of the rockers into the springs and roll them up into place. Missed one. Nice. Okay. Now I'm carefully snugging these down to the head, evenly, trying not to bend or destroy anything. Making sure all the push rods are happy and in their little cups. Some of these are obviously on lift, like that one, so looking at that does us no good. But looking at the ones that are not on lift, you can see the cups in there have gone down something like the thickness of that retaining wire that holds the lifter together. That seems about right to me. Now I gotta clean these other terrible, horrible rockers. Now remember, I'm not taking them apart, which is kind of unfortunate. It's at least possible that some of this stuff ends up inside the shaft. What I can do though is knock the bolts out and then spray that thing out as best as possible, blow through all the holes, get a good bit of brake clean in there, and hopefully we can get any debris to come out that way. Now the later style shafts are plugged here at the very end. These are actually plugged here inside of this bolt that goes through, so you can't get chunks out of that big hole. There's no guarantee we're gonna get every bit of debris out. It is what it is. Oh yeah, buddy. Tons and tons of it. Yet another component I probably should have put in the ultrasonic cleaner weeks ago. Not that it would have helped with the debris inside the shafts. The big ones actually do move around, at least on this one. But none of these smaller ones do. Tasty. This one has been rebuilt or something, which might be why those stands are moving around. The plugs are at the very ends on this one. There's also an arrow marking on this shaft that's missing from that other one. Anyway, this one's about as clean as I could ever get it, so it's time to do this. There, I've got the odd side rockers in. These definitely have preload. In fact, only one push rod on this side moves freely at all. Anyway, they all look really good, so I'm not gonna worry about anything. So we have a long block. Now it's time to dress that long block. We need an intake manifold and some valve covers, among other things. But with those on, I could finish spritzing paint on there. So now I'm working on getting the intake ready. This thing is slightly full of cobwebs and covered in dust. I bought this from Rooster quite a while ago. The original vision was maybe to put it on my 68 Charger, but that was a silly idea. I'm glad this car came along, so I finally had a reason to actually use this thing. High-performance Chrysler Hemis used dual quad inline carburetors starting in 1955, and when the B block came around in 1958, they shared that same feature on the high-performance ones, like the Super D500, which is what I'm cloning here. Now this intake manifold with casting number 1827899 was used starting in 58 and ending in either 1960 or 1962, depending on who you believe. This would have fit any low-deck B engine. That would be a 350, 361, or 383 in that time. Of course, there's a 400 in later years, and you could bolt this onto one of those too. This intake is unfortunately slightly missing something. I actually have the little piece around here somewhere, but I have no idea where. We're probably just gonna run it anyway. The moment I bolt that intake on the engine and paint it, I'm gonna find that little corner piece. I found a socket my friend custom made me. I found a USPS LLV vehicle fire prevention check sheet. I found Festive Holiday Prudence, who unfortunately needs a new battery. But no dual quad intake manifold corner. It's fine. Just a little crud in there. So at least one roly-poly. It's orange under the grime. This never should have been orange. You may have noticed the small bolt pattern on this intake for the carburetor mounting. That is because it uses the small pattern that was first used on the WCFB 4-barrel, like this. Early Carter AFBs, like these, with the small air horn size, use that same bolt pattern, although the footprint of the carb is larger, and as you can see, there is room for the bigger 4-bolt pattern that we know and love today. In fact, these carbs sometimes have some of those holes drilled for whatever reason. The later Carter and Edelbrock carburetors we know and love today that use that same basic form factor, but the bigger, more modern air horn, have both bolt patterns, so they're actually backwards compatible with those earlier Carters. In the front carburetor position, there's a bit of a clearance issue with the throttle linkage here on these runners. Now, the factory used big, thick gaskets for these, and I think they probably used a slightly different linkage design as well. It's pretty common today to use carb spacers to solve the fitment problems on these manifolds. This has the added benefit of adding an open spacer, equalizing between the two sides of the manifold. Because for some reason, these things have a wall right down the middle. They also have super tiny primary bores, which are unsuitable for some performance Carter carburetors, so the spacers can help with that too. I should probably sandblast this thing. I'm not going to, but I should. I don't know what I did with the intake bolts, but they're not any of the places they should be. I don't actually know where the valve cover bolts are either. And it turns out I showered the nice, freshly painted valve covers in grimy, greasy bits. Nice. Real nice. I gotta pump the brakes on this operation. It's Thanksgiving Eve at 8:05 p.m. and I am hungry. We'll get back to this in a couple days. I'll probably steal all the missing bolts from the 383 pile. We'll get a water pump housing and a balancer on. This engine will be totally dressed, like soon. And just as soon as it is, I want to push that car in here. We'll drop the engine under the hood again, and then I can get back to the fun making the transmission fit fabrication projects. All right, you caught me. Couldn't help but spritz a bit more silver on there. That is hot. I really like this. Think I'm gonna have to do a gold one next. Is this how you do this? I hope it is. We're going for it. Oh, move your dog head. It's a new day and the sun is out, briefly. It's also cold. The wind keeps dropping tree parts on this thing. I don't like it. Still need to get the rest of this crap stripped off. Although Mother Nature does seem to be handling that for me. Just yesterday I had a comment. Jamie, those 57s were very prone to rust. Why would you keep that thing outside? Where exactly would you like me to put it? Am I supposed to raise the roof of the shop and put in some of those double stacker lifts? Okay, in all seriousness, there are 3 cars that don't belong to me in the shop right now, and I'm, let's say, gradually working towards getting them finished and out of here. But even then, I have at least 6 cars I'd like to put in those 3 spots, so it's an ongoing problem. Not like it's all that dry in here anyway. Anyway, today, if all goes to plan, and I hope it does, because otherwise I don't have a video for this weekend, we are going to see that car in the shop, and we're going to see that shiny, new 361 between the fenders once again. Well, maybe not between the fenders, but definitely under the hood. Here's some Dead Dodge Garage lore for you. Before I named it that, I considered the name Between the Fenders, because everything I like to do with these cars is there. I've never really cared about bodywork or paint all that much. Suspension, brakes, hardly. But engines, that's where I like to be. So with that, I guess we can get back to this one, which almost looks too good. You know, I've got the silver here, I've got a Hemi orange, I've got a red. If I got the paint on that engine back there, the Chrysler blue, we'd have like the whole set. I mentioned I was probably going to steal the intake bolts from the 383 pile. Well, there's an issue there. Well, a couple, maybe. The first one is 2 of these bolts are actually fuel pump bolts. You can tell that because they have the built-in washers there. They also have a little nylock section somewhere. I'm not seeing it. There, that one has it. That is a special bolt just used on the fuel pump on one of these Chrysler engines. This one's also rounded off. Anyway, someone swapped 2 of those in with the intake, which is really funny. One of these bolts holding the fuel pump down to that engine was not a correct bolt, but one was, which means we have a total of 3. Also, you'll notice lock washers were added to these, which is pretty common. The factory installed the intake bolts without any washer, except for the one bolt that would hold the ground cable down in some applications. Why they didn't use washers, I can't tell you. I hear a blue dart rumbling in the distance, which is good. I'm gonna need Allan's help to push this pile today. Anyway, this means we only have 5 actual intake bolts. I'm not so big a purist that these have to be factory, but I sure would like them to be. I don't know why I was even bothering digging around for factory bolts. Here's what I've got in the hardware bin thing. No one will ever know those aren't original. Well, a water pump housing fits in the basket. Just. So now I've got all the intake hardware stuff on hand and ready to rock. We've got the intake itself, of course, the 8 intake bolts, 3 of which are shiny and new. Don't worry about that. We've got the end rails here, and we've got 6 bolts to hold those down. Those are all clean and ready to go as well. The intake tray here, I robbed from the pile of Lord knows how many of these we have at Rocket Restorations. I'm now going to add some silicone around the outer perimeter on the underside of this thing. That should help keep the oil in where the oil goes. I do not put this on the top. That way, in the future, we can pull the intake off and change it. You know, if the dual quad setup turns out to be terrible or something. This can's got to be getting down there, but it did manage to get the whole tray messed up. Allan got the balancer all hand cleaned after it's run through the ultrasonic cleaner. I just greased the inside where it goes on the crank and out here where the seal lift will be sliding over it. So I guess we could install that real quick. Just as soon as I'm done making this horrible mess. And believe me, it is a mess. Yeah, I overdid it. As you can see, I like to set these trays in place and hold them down with the end rails and bolts. These are not tight yet. I want the tray to be able to move around a little bit if necessary to get all the intake bolts started. Thank you, loud, obnoxious machine. Intake is on and torqued. Of course, when I say torqued, I don't mean I use the actual torque spec. I just do this by hand with a normal ratchet handle. It's worked out pretty well for me so far. I do now have the rails torqued down as well. Everything's looking pretty good. You can see we're squishing out some silicone here and all along this edge. So I feel good about that. Here's the spot by our broken corner. It sure looks to me like the tray is set down. You can see it did squish out silicone all through there. And I'm making a mess. I don't think we're gonna have any issues. Intake's done, so I'm moving on to the balancer here. I've got it set in place. Still need to get the pressing tool to send it home. Notice the line is perfectly lined up at 10 already. I preset that with the degree wheel. This is usually where I put them when I'm gonna stab the distributor in. Before I put the distributor in, I do still need to fill this thing with oil and pre-lubricate it. Remind me to get oil. There's the balancer installation tool in place. 1¼ wrench to tighten the thing down, 9/16 to hold the center stud. It works really well. The one I have is actually the EverTough rental tool from O'Reilly. I rented it and never returned it like 7 years ago. I noticed the damper ring on this thing is farther inward than I'm used to. I don't know if that's just an early engine thing or what. It's definitely where it needs to be though. Small block bolt, big block bolt. You know how to torque these things, right? I'm in agreement with various commenters who say the C-body HP manifolds I've got hanging on here are massive overkill for this project, especially when you consider the various other low performance decisions I've made for this build. Except the dual quads, of course. Water pump housing's done. Anyway, the C-body HP manifolds don't look right. They don't fit right. In general, they're probably the totally wrong thing for this car, but they are cool and I have them. I also don't have any other manifolds to use at this time. So if I want to change them, I'm going to have to do some digging in the back room at Rocket again. Here's another thing that might help me make that decision. Not that the correct spark plug wire holders are necessarily the most important thing in the universe, but I have these and I would like to use them. I got these from a gentleman named Scott with a bunch of other handy little bracket pieces. They're perfect for this build and I'd like to recondition them, paint them silver, and put them on there. Oh, thanks, Scott. Problem, these are designed to hold the wires over the factory log manifolds. They're not going to work to do that over the HP manifolds. On applications with these manifolds, the wires come in from the front, underneath here, where they're safe. They would probably work on this side. So I can have HP manifolds or I can have factory plug wire holders, but I cannot have both. I think for now, I'm just going to leave these components off. I am going to install the valve covers to keep chunks from falling in the engine, but we'll figure out the exhaust manifold and plug wire situation at a later time. So about those valve covers, I did kind of already show these, but I don't know if I've explained what they are. They're the right ones. These would have been factory equipment on Chrysler products with big blocks from 58 until I think 62. At some point they added integral wire holders. The 63 engine that we're using here came with those from the factory. They look like this, and they also don't fit with the HP manifolds in case you were curious. But there's another important difference here, and it's these bolt holes down at the corners. I think it is possible to install the later 6-bolt style covers on these heads, but it wouldn't look right. We gotta have this. This is probably obvious, but the early style cover uses a matching early style gasket. It's lacking this bolt right here in the corner, and it's actually shaped a little bit differently too. This curve is way different. So while you probably could cut up this gasket to make it work, I wouldn't want to try and do that. The full gasket set I got from Felpro for this engine is part number FS7891 PT-11. This gasket set came with the late valve cover gaskets. They do list a part number that comes with these, but it's not available and probably hasn't been for years. So I got the later style full set that was available and ordered the gaskets for the valve covers individually. The part number for those from Felpro, VS11703C. In addition to the 2 gaskets themselves, the set came with this baggie of 8 little round seals. I don't even think those are made of cork. They're some weird fibrous material. I can only assume these are meant to go here under the bolts, but they don't actually fit there. It's very common to see these covers bent down like this around the bolt holes. These are really bad in that respect, probably because they're 4-bolt covers and they're so prone to leaking. I'm going to try and flatten these out with a hammer a little bit before I install them. Sure, I could have done this before they were painted. Ooh. You could put some kind of backing under here. If they weren't already painted and pretty, I would. Yeah, it's better. It's probably good enough for who it's for. In all my years of messing with Chrysler products, I don't think I've ever seen a big block that did not have slightly leaky valve covers. I am going to give it the old college try here, sealing the cork gasket to the covers themselves, not to the head, in case we need to take these back off later. But it probably won't work anyway. And that, of course, is years of experience speaking. These things just love to leak. I've only just noticed the early gaskets and covers are also lacking the little locating tabby thingies and the spots that they lock into. The gasket just sits right inside the cover like that. Photo finish on running out of right stuff. Well, actually, I'm a little shy. I can't do the top of this valve cover. Good enough. Of course, without the tangs or silicone, the stupid gasket doesn't want to stay in its home. I'm sure I've given this note before, but it bears repeating. If you don't know which of your valve covers goes on which side, Chrysler always ran the wiring down the passenger side on their V8s. I probably shouldn't say always, and I probably shouldn't say passenger side because that'll confuse people from right-hand drive countries. The right side of the car, at least in our American models. Hey, I found one intake bolt. Gross. Anyway, valve cover fasteners are going to be a problem. Those other heads had studs in every position. So as you can see, I've got 3 studs with nuts, and then everything else is just nuts. I've been referring back to this post on forwardlook.net for reference on little details for this engine. It looks like these had all studs and nuts. LA engines use bolts for the valve covers, of course, and later big blocks do too. I don't know exactly when these were phased in place of the studs. I do know that you could still find studs in the corners, you know, the positions that we don't have on the engine I'm building, up until at least 1970, although it wasn't consistent. Now I just have to extract a bunch of these. Well, that wasn't so bad. Only slightly ruined one of them. That's fine, we'll use this guy. I could only find 7 individual nuts anyway. It took a bit, but I rubbed enough brain cells together to realize that the studs are here to act as a guide to get the gasket in the right place in lieu of the later tabs. Yeah, buddy. That's sick. Alan's scrubbing on the pump housing as we speak. We'll get that in a minute, but go ahead and finish this while it's out of the way. Get in there. Oh yeah, no one's ever gonna notice that's there. Okay, went on a little heavy there. Good thing no one will ever see that either. Whoever painted this 50 years ago got that Hemi orange into every little nook and cranny. That looks great. Nice, nice. We're running out of parts in the tote. We've still got an oil pump drive shaft. That'll go in later. Distributor hold down, same story. Old school cast iron thermostat housing. Need a thermostat. Guess I should put that on the list. We also have bolts for a fuel pump. The other thing in here is a receipt for those gaskets. 93 bucks for the full gasket set. $17 for valve covers. 120 bucks with tax. Well, there you go. It's all silver. I will still have to do the water pump and the thermostat housing, but I've got to get a thermostat and a pump first. So for now, it's good to go. This used almost exactly 1 can of the engine silver. We need a couple breathers for this thing. It doesn't use a PCV, of course. It predates those. This is the one off of the 361 valve covers. It's a little ugly. Alan found this one on a set of poly valve covers we got at some point. This side is supposed to have a road draft tube or downdraft tube or whatever, but we don't have one of those. Alan's taking the rusty inner fender back to the North Pole with him to clean that up. It fits in a dart trunk, turns out. While the paint on the engine dries, I'm going to move the wagon out of the way. Then we can push this thing back in the shop finally. Ugh, stinky. Yeah. Here we go again. Whee! Hold it! Clear it by an inch. If that. You're good. Is that centered? Not even a little. Yeah. As all right as I can be. Right. Haven't done what? Oh, tighten the lug up? I'm gonna go take a nap. I had to take a break to eat some leftovers and get some hot homemade cider. Not the boozy kind, it's a little early for that. Most of it I made with the juicer because it turns out pressing is hard. Obviously, the idea here is to put that in there quickly. But I have realized, because I kind of care about this car, there are a few small things I should do first. When I pressure washed the outside of the car, I did clean some of this, kind of. You can see the wand marks there. I didn't do a great job. I guess I'm going to have to hand clean it just a little bit. And then I do want to hit all of this with some semi-flat black paint, just so it looks slightly less terrible. Now these control arms are going to be coming off. We're going to be doing disc brakes and swapping suspension parts and such. So I'm not going to focus on any of that. The stuff that's hidden by the engine and I won't be able to access anymore, that's where I'm going to be pointing the spray can. Before I do that, I have a little bit more grinding to do. I think I've got marks on the inside indicating what I wanted to do here. Basically, I was just going to like enlarge this ever so slightly using the big giant plate thingy here for the spacer that goes on top. I'm going to try and get some kind of washer spreader thing on the inside as well. I wonder how many cans of this I've sprayed in my life. I bet it's a big number. Oh, this one's almost dead. Ah! It's fine by now. I have more. I did indeed have a reference line on the back. I'm using a carbide bit to cut out to the shape I had drawn on there. Now this is not really the most ideal. I think if I was a real fabricator customizer, I'd be chopping this, straightening it out here, adding a plate on here to cover up all the ugliness. Maybe like this fancy spacer plate we already made up. I could like cut that up and weld it on there and slot the hole. I just don't want to. So anyway, I started scrubbing. If this was some kind of high-dollar legitimate operation, the body would probably be off this frame right now and it would be at a sandblaster. I just don't roll like that. Some of this is dirt and grime. Some of it's overspray and body shop dust. Is that mold? Ugh. You've heard of grease and wax remover, right? Hey, it ain't perfect, but it sure is black. Oh, look, some more parts I should have cleaned and prepared ages ago. These things are covered in undercoating, which is really obnoxious to remove. Have I ever mentioned that I really don't like cleaning stuff? Good enough. I just learned it's really easy to take these engine mounts apart. All you gotta do is put some compressed air into this hole and the rubber will just shoot right out of there. You know, the stud in there is offset, so in theory, you could do that and then clock it to change the engine mounting and help level it or square it or whatever. While that paint's drying, I gotta tell you about this whole thing. I think I mentioned that the old school alternator mount comes off of here and then here, but does not come off the cylinder head. I figured that's why there were no holes here, but I noticed something way late in the game. This head actually does have those holes drilled and tapped. And if I had flipped these side for side, of course they're ambidextrous, then those holes would have been at the front on the passenger side, and I could have used the later style alternator mounting. I'm at least mostly sure that this bracket, like used on the 300G, does not go to the cylinder head back there. If it does, I'm in trouble. Of course, this 57 car would have come from the factory with a generator. The 58 would have too. Mounts are in place. Anyway, I'm going to stare at this for another minute or two and try and figure out if there's anything else essential that needs to happen, but I'm pretty sure it's ready to just drop in the hole. I'm going to use the lift to install the engine. We have incredible access with the whole front clip off, so this shouldn't be too tough by myself. Typically, I'd use a lift plate bolted to the intake for this, but in this case, that's not going to work. It's going to go super crooked, isn't it? We have fun. Was this a good time to remember I wanted to scrub that firewall? In keeping with the general good enough for who it's for vibe, I'm giving all of this a quick scrub. That actually looks a whole lot better over there. I got the mold cleaned off the box here. There's some random overspray on it as well, so I'm taking that off with some triple aught steel wool. I just found a spare set of keys. And that is not the first set I've found. You know what? I actually think that looks pretty darn good. There's still some rattle can stuff out here you'll never see. That's behind the inner fender. This stuff, yeah, but there will be a brake booster and hopefully a plate in the way. I'm happy with it. Let's drop this bad boy in there. Guess I could have lifted it with that arm. Whatever. Yeah, that's something. I've been expecting to catch my shin on one of these bumper brackets this whole time. Haven't done that, but I did rip my pants. Should probably lower that. We're gonna try really hard not to ruin the heater box. Installing engines while half the car's missing is really nice. Like really nice. I might need a bunch more angle to clear the box. Oh yeah, Chevy filter. Should I add another strap? Oh, that's not centered. I probably should have just used a picker. This is dumb. No, well, buy the ticket, take the ride. Woohoo! Stay. The big giant heater box here is a bit of an issue. Currently the valve cover is just below it, and the oil pan is, well, half an inch off the cross member, so I think we can make this work somehow. Whee! But now I need to, no, maybe? Now we're gonna hit that valve cover. We're actually really close. Let's see if I can get this guy in there. Probably could have painted that. Why? We should have cut this down like a lot. Also, I can't see where the hole is now. Ah, whatever. Here we go. Whee! Yeah, there it is. I'm gonna have to loosen that strap. Slide this guy in here. Oh yeah, sure. Nice. Oh yeah, buddy. Woohoo! Okay, so currently there's nothing to hold this up in the back. I don't really want to set it on the steering. Ooh, no, not that much. I don't know, last time we ran a strap under it. Maybe we'll do that again. Well, it's off the chain. It is in there. There's a strap at the back, but it's a broken piece of garbage that tried to destroy my hand tightening it. So it's just barely up off the steering linkage. It's at quite the angle right now, but it's in there and it looks awesome. You know what I just realized I forgot? Dipstick tube. The one I took out's over here. It doesn't have a support ear on it, and it's also split right there. I was planning to weld that back together. Forgot how huge this thing is. Had to scooch some stuff. Going up. Carefully. Was this a good time to remember that I wanted to have this throttle bracket all cleaned up and installed before the engine went in? Oh well. Paint it black, put it back, or whatever. Well, here we are again. Missed a spot. Probably could have sprayed the underside of the cross members, I guess. Anyway, recall if you will, we're using a push-button 727 for this project. These were used from 1962 until 1964. Technically, they were still very similar for 1965, but they didn't have that flange yoke thing anymore. Supposedly, this transmission was rebuilt. I had every intention of removing the pan, inspecting things, adjusting the bands, and just generally making sure it was actually worth putting in this car. But I haven't done that, and I'm probably just going to install it right now. Now, I can still drop the pan once it's hovering in there. In fact, it might even be easier. I wonder what Allan's doing right now. Not helping me with this. Oh, that was really dumb. It's on there. Why's that all bent? That's probably my fault somehow. I'm going to get this thing strapped down to the transmission jack so I don't die. And then I will install the torque converter, which is a thing I actually have now. Unlike last time I did this. This might be the last time I put this transmission in the car. No guarantees though. When Tom and Evan first picked up the car, they slightly forgot to grab this. This appears to be a dusty, rebuilt, torque converter. I think it's even the right one for this application. Has the guy's name on it and everything. That's a slant 6 valve cover bolt. Now, it was not covered when it got here. I did that. And I'm a little worried there might be some dusty chunks in there. Oh, yeah. Know how we're going to clean that out? We're not, because you pretty much can't. I mean, I'll try. But there's just no way to reliably get all of the dust out of this thing. I mean, it's one thing if it's a crappy old torque converter core, but if it's one you need, if it's actually good, don't leave it sitting open like this. Cover it with something. Shove a rag in it. Watch your eyes. Go. Some of that fell on my head. I could probably put some fluid in this thing, shake it all around, and then open that drain plug and watch it slowly come out. That would cost me a bunch of time and some brand new fluid, and would probably not get it a whole lot better than it is. So I'm just gonna send it. Should we go ahead and cut to some unknown point in the future when we're putting the 3-pedal solution in this car too? I've got the right transmission for it. Test fitting the converter. I wanted to make sure the pilot hub thing fit in the back of the crank, which it does. The other thing I wanted to establish was the position of the torque converter bolt hole locations. These only fit one way because this is an offset pattern. So I spun it around several times and wasn't paying very good attention. I did finally find the point at which all of the bolts I could see line up correctly. Now I'm gonna paint mark the flex plate and the torque converter right here. Oh, by the way, there are also different size flex plates. There are 10-inch circles and 11-inch circles. This early thing should be an 11-inch, I believe. Yes! We don't want to start the engine with the torque converter dry, so I'm going to pour some fluid in here. This is always a very slow, arduous process. I should be able to get 2 to 3 quarts in here, although the torque converter actually holds a good bit more than that. It really comes down to a question of patience. Something I'm usually lacking. 2 quarts was all I had, so I guess that's what it gets. I did put a small amount of fluid on this outer diameter that's going to go into the front pump seal. I even put a little bit on the input shaft splines. And now for the fun part, stacking the converter. What you do is, you carefully slide it in here and spin it and wiggle it and try to engage all of the splines and then the teeth that drive the front pump. There should be 3 distinct clicks. That was 1. This can take a while. It can take a couple tries sometimes. Or it just falls in. You'll know it's all the way in when it almost hits at the bottom. That was too easy. And we put our painted ear down to match the painted ear here on the flex plate. And then we put this thing where it goes. I don't know if this jack goes high enough for where the car is. We'll see in a minute. Stick 2. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna make it. Oh, sketchy. Whee! That might go. The angle's way wrong, but we actually are good on height, I think. Okay, we'll lower it back down a little bit and see if we can get some bolts in there. Something's horribly wrong. This shouldn't have been so easy. Transmission's still at a bit of an up angle as I get the bolts coming down, but we're really close. You can see the gap there, but it's on the dowels. Look how much space we've got from the flex plate to the pad on the torque converter. That's good. Notice the converter moves. If you get to this point where the engine and transmission are going together, but the torque converter is jammed up and you can't turn it, stop, because you didn't get it stacked in all the way. Pull the transmission back off and try again. I've got 4 bolts holding the transmission to the block. They are torqued. I did have to change these out from the ones that were with it because those were really long. These are 1.25 inches, I think. You certainly don't want to punch extra holes through the inside of your block. So yeah, get bolts that are the right length. Now we're going up. And that's where we run out of jack. It's like 2 inches shy of where it needs to be. Carefuling. More carefuling. Yeah. There-ish. Okay, we're not quite centered. Engine mounts are tweaked just a little bit. I'll probably be solving that with a ratchet strap too. But there's the engine in something very close to its final location. We might be just a hair low here. You can see the pan's below the cross member, but it's actually supposed to be. I did use a ratchet strap to drag the back of the transmission over, and when I released it, it stayed put. Very nice. That means nothing's in a bind or anything. I think as we were doing that, the stud was probably moving in that passenger side mount. This is the transmission mounting cross member. I took a bunch of measurements and left a bunch of marks, so while the drivetrain was out of the car and I had this thing down, I could modify it, welding on the plate thingy we need here, maybe some gusset action. But I didn't actually do that. Allan cleaned the thing pretty nicely. So I guess what I'm going to do is mount it back in here, as I've already done. I've even got the bolts tight. And now I'm going to fab up the piece that's going to extend off the front here and catch this aftermarket generic GM style engine mount. Hacking up something just like this is what I had in mind, so that's great. Hoarding saves the day again. Looks like the top plate needs to be 4.5 inches long overall. Any longer, it'll run into the transmission, or at least be in the way of pulling down the park section. Now I know I've mentioned I'm not much of a fabricator, but I'm trying. Squared up this cut end, kind of. Good thing that end doesn't need to be straight. Trimmed off that little bit. And now we have this. Needs some bolt holes, which are going to be oval for reasons I hope are obvious. Here I've made a terribly scaled drawing of what we need. It's 3 3/8 inch-ish from the face on the crossmember here to the center of the bolt holes. And the spacing between the two is 1.5 inches. This rectangular tubing is 4 inches tall or wide or whatever. The center point is right there, 2 inches from each edge. I went 3/4 of an inch off of that since it's 1.5 inches and this should be right in the center. And then I measured from the face that we're gonna weld to the crossmember this way, 3 3/8 inches. So X or plus or whatever marks the spot for both of the holes we're gonna drill. I sure do like these cobalt bits, at least the few that aren't broken in half or totally destroyed. Okay, Google, add drill doctor to my shopping list. There we have a couple of 3/8 inch holes, which are remarkably close to where they need to be, I'll have you know. And now we've got 2 3/8-ish ovals. I started by angling the drill bit in both directions, then I followed that up with a carbide job, and finally filed off the nastiness. Looks pretty good to me. All right. Now I just got to use a welder to convince this piece of metal to stay attached to this piece of metal while the transmission jack slowly lowers constantly. It is amazing how many of life's problems you can solve with a cutting implement and a welder. You don't even have to be terribly good at it, which I find really helpful. Now we just rattle some more cans before anyone can look at the welds. It's still hot. This isn't a good idea. Also, I'm almost out of paint. Well, it's as painted as it could be. And it's bolted in tight, hopefully for the last time. So I suppose this was as good a time as any to find out those holes are actually 7/16. In my defense, they were jammed full of rubber. The shortest 7/16 bolts I have are these. So that's a problem. Funny enough, Mopar transmission mount bolts are the same size. If only I could find 2 of them in this mess. After a little more in situ destruction with a die grinder, we've got 1 bolt that actually threads. Yay! Look at that! The jack is out, the transmission is mounted, it's solid, it's centered in the tunnel. I do have the engine mounts fastened. I don't love this, you can't really see it. I got a big washer in there and it covers all of the gaps and grabs some material, but it's less than I want. I got a chunk of steel on the driver's side here, the important side, you know. Here's our final transmission pan clearance with all those mounts tight. You know, I think it could have been a 1/4 inch higher, but I'm good with it. Whoo boy, we got clearance for the oil pump, but not much of it. Look at that. It's a thing of beauty. It fits in there great. And sure, we've kind of already seen this, but it wasn't all pretty and silver then. And it wasn't actually bolted down. This is a big moment. Full frame and C-body guys are just way too spoiled with this amount of room to work in. Oh, I missed a spot. Much more gooder-ish. Yeah, this is pretty great. But you know what we got to do to get the full effect? That's a beautiful thing. Although I really need to clean and paint those now. Man, I think I've seen cooler things, but it's been a while. This is amazing. Yep, the shin fricker got me again. Recall we have a slight hose fitment issue back here. I need to find 2 of these correct, slightly shorter filters in less crappy shape than this one. And then I'm thinking instead of the carb spacers, I will try and find a couple of the thick gaskets. Where'd you come from? Anyway, those 2 things will allow this hose to come out slightly above the air filter and then like bend around it this way, which is what the factory piece did. This guy will go right here, once I get some more paint anyway. These carbs, of course, are just cores. They need to be gone through. I need to come up with a dual carb linkage. I was thinking about just locking them together the hot rod way. I should probably use a factory type progressive, although I don't really want to. We'll figure that out later. I'm getting excited all over again. You just do not see these cars. And you certainly don't see them with all the cool period hot rod parts. Like that. I'm being reminded the interior still smells. Yes, we're gonna do something about that. Not today though. I was really hoping to get the front end back on today so we could see this car complete again. Unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards. Obviously this took a while. It's way past dinner time. Yeah, unfortunately, that's all the progress we're going to make this time around. It's Friday night at a ridiculous hour, so we just kind of got to be done for now. But I promise you, there will be more progress on this car coming soon. We've got to see it together and running, or we're going to lose the whatever. Exhaust, a starter, an electrical system, cooling lines for the transmission, a radiator to hook them to, some sorts of hoses, various fluids, alternator brackets. Will the power steering pump even work with this engine? Brakes someday. We don't have a booster or a master or anything. Suspension overhaul, de-smelling the interior, painting the roof. And the list of things that we need to do here goes on and on from there. But you know what? I'm calling it a victory anyway. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing some more progress on the 57 Coronet. It'll be back soon, I hope. Until then, as ever, thanks for watching. And remember, slow and steady wins the thing. Coolest thing of ever.